Happy live stream Thursday. This is indeed a live stream Thursday. This is my third live in this very day. And I bring that upon myself. Part of it is some of you have seen the gear I set up to make this happen. Setting up the gear is pretty extensive. So economy of movement, once the camera and the laptop and the monitors and the stuff, or this morning, 3 cameras feeding one live stream. Once that's set up, it's best to just keep going. So here we are for Q&A. We're going to make it happen. Before we jump into the Q&A, we've been doing this new thing, Tool Talk. A month ago or so, I had Izzy Swan on. That was all Tool Talk. But I've got a cool thing I want to show you. Some of you maybe saw this at the, I got to think a second, 1 o'clock live stream earlier today. But let me show you of what I speak. I have been using this tool a lot lately. This tool being, this is called the Micro Jig FitFinder. And it's a halvesies thing. What that means is that when I want to measure, when I want to find the middle of something, this has thumb screws on the back, and that makes all of this adjustable. So I can move these components up and down. When I'm measuring something, so for instance, if I need to know the exact center of that Baltic birch plywood, and this is a great example because Baltic birch, when I call this 1/2-inch plywood, it isn't 1/2 inch, it's metric. It's 12 millimeters. So yes, half is 6 millimeters. But if I want to work in inches, what's half of that? I don't know until I do this. When this part of the jig lands on the item like that, and then reaching around the back, I'm tightening those thumb screws. This part of the jig points to the center. So it's very useful for a lot of different stuff. I used it earlier today on that 1 o'clock live stream. What I was doing was finding the center of a cutting board in order to put finger recesses in it. So I want to point out that when you look up the FitFinder, and we've got the links for this in the description, when you look up FitFinder, there's a basic tool. And then there's an accessory kit you can get with it that adds more stuff. And it's worth getting the accessory kit. This item I use a lot, so I'm just going to walk this into you. That V shape, like me, it lacks focus. There we go. That V shape with the slot in the middle. So imagine you want to resaw a board and you want to resaw it right down the middle. And you can measure it. You probably know I'm not a huge fan of measuring when I can avoid it, or you can gauge it. So with this tip in the FitFinder, I can use this to find the center. I can put this base against my bandsaw fence, and then I can nest the bandsaw blade into that slot you saw a second ago and position the fence until it's nested in that slot. And that's going to get my fence in exact center of that board. So it's a cool tool. It's a thing that once it's in your shop, in my case, the more, once it's here, the more I get my hands on it, the more I'm thinking, oh yeah, and I could use it for this. I could use it for this. If you saw me do the live stream, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago on setting up a lock miter, I used the FitFinder there. That's what I originally got it for. So Tool Talk this month, Micro Jig FitFinder, very useful. It's something that, like me, I think you're going to find a lot of applications for. And that's all I'm trying to do with this Tool Talk. I don't have any stake in whether or not you buy that thing, but I want to try to just make you aware of cool stuff I run into. And maybe you think it's cool, maybe you don't need it. That's okay, either way. Before we jump in here, a couple things. Big thank you to Tight Bond. I have to look at my monitor. As always, for underwriting our live streams and keeping this free for you. Free is good. I also want to point out that earlier today, if you're looking for a Mother's Day gift, earlier today, I made a box and it's resting comfortably right over here. So I'm just going to do a little ad for this. So the premise, part of the premise with this was maybe you're looking for something to make for Mother's Day. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're just looking for some cool woodworking skills. What's neat with this box, with this project, is that the joinery, which is mitered corners, that's done on the router table. The way that the lid nests into the box, that's done on the router table. There's a recess right there that makes it easy to pick the lid up. That's done on the router table. There are feet that are defined here. That's done on the router table. There's a groove that holds the bottom in. That's done on the router table. So it's a project that really optimizes all the different stuff we can do with a router and the really good cut quality that we get from router bits. So that was an 11 o'clock, an 11 a.m. live stream. We archive all that stuff. So if you're looking for a project to do in general, if you're looking for a gift for somebody, you know, mom, you got a lot of time here, right? May is Mother's Day. Have a look at this. Print the PDF. The live stream gives you the important stuff that you need to know to set up the router bits. The PDF gives you all the minutia, all the individual details, the size of the parts, the how to set up the router bits and get that chamfer just right. A lot of information there. So if you're interested in that box, you can always go back and look at those live streams. Jess is a rock star at putting links in the chat roles, and will probably do so for you because that's the kind of nice person she is. Now, preguntas. Let's jump into questions. When making dovetail drawers, Mike says, would you make the groove for the drawer bottom first or dovetails first? Is there a general rule for the types of drawer joints as well? Let's do types of drawer joints first. My favorite way to put drawers together is a lock rabbet. And if you have been watching this channel, if you've been watching GOA for a while, you have seen me do lock rabbets both on the table saw with a dado head, and my favorite way is on a router table with a slot cutter. If you go to the upper right-hand corner of the page where there's a little magnifying glass and you search lock rabbet, you are gonna, and this is not a lock miter, it's a whole different thing. If you search lock rabbet, you're going to find that content. And that's a great way to put boxes together. It's very robust. It's fast. It's pretty easy to do once you understand the setup. And then, of course, dovetails are the ubiquitous, you know, people open a thing and they look, oh, it's dovetails. This must be great furniture. Of course, maybe not understanding that today there are machines that can produce dovetails faster than I can talk right now. And that doesn't inherently mean the furniture is crazy good, but people get that impression. That being said, dovetails are very strong. They've got mechanical strength to them, which means when they're used correctly, they're not going to separate even without glue on there. They're not going to separate in the direction that the drawer opens, and lots and lots of glue surface. So those reasons have made dovetails the drawer box thing for a long time. But again, if you're looking for other ways to make boxes, look up my approach for lock rabbets, and it's a very fast way to put stuff together. With the groove, there are a couple answers to this. On my, I own a Porter Cable 4216 dovetail jig. I can adjust the position of my material in that jig. So I can control on a given board where the joint will fall. If I'm using that jig, I am in all likelihood going to cut the joint first and the groove later. The reason being, I can control where the tail of the joint will be, and then go back and make sure the groove goes right where the tail is. Whether you do it first or second, once you, the bottom line out of this is I want the groove to fall on a tail, the center of a tail, which then also puts it in the center of a socket. So regardless of what jig you're using, once you know that, whether you do the groove first or second doesn't really matter. It's not going to hurt the dovetail if the groove is already there. For me, it makes more sense that if I cut the joint first, then I go back and I position, I'm probably doing this with a dado head on my table saw, then I position the fence on the table saw to get the groove in the right spot so it aligns with the tail. Either way is okay. Either the same mic or another mic says, I recently watched a YouTube video featuring Frank Klausz around 2014, hosting a tour of his then new workshop in New Jersey. His final highlight was his plumb bob collection. He named 2 or 3 woodworkers who had made plumb bobs for him, describing them as very special people. Prominently displayed in the front row was one by George von Druska. Very impressive. If you are in woodworking and you've not seen Frank Klausz do woodworking, you're missing out. So Frank and I did woodworking shows together 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Frank's story is very, very interesting. He grew up in Hungary, in Budapest, and he had the very traditional learn woodworking journey of, as a kid, he went to the shop, he slept on the floor. His job was to have the fire in the shop going before the cabinet makers got there. And then he'll tell the story of eventually one day they let him hold a saw. Eventually one day they let him make a cut. Eventually one day they let him try a dovetail. So he learned in the very traditional apprentice, journeyman, master way how to do woodworking. Frank's use of hand tools. Frank can hand cut a dovetail faster than I can set up that Porter cable jig. So this is a throwback. When Frank and I were doing shows together, he would hand cut dovetails at the shows. So that's a hand cut through dovetail that he did in probably 99, maybe 2000. That's autographed inside by Frank. Very cool guy. Just look him up and learn some stuff from him. So anyway, he turned 60 when we were doing the shows, and I knew he had a plumb bob collection, and I wanted to make him something for his collection. And I'm an avid turner, so I had a piece of antler, and that's the main part of the plumb bob. I had a piece of copper, and so I turned the antler. I bored a hole in the bottom. I epoxied the copper in there, and then you can turn copper on a wood lathe. So then I turn the copper to a point, and that's the final point of the plumb bob. So it is very fun in the video that when Frank is talking about all of these, he points that plumb bob out. I put a link in here to that video, and if you want to go and watch it, at about 9 minutes and 35 seconds, he's showing the plumb bobs and he mentions my name. So it's I'm very happy that he did that. I'm happy that he liked, of his hundreds of plumb bobs, that he liked that enough to give it a mention. I recently watched your video, how to create bow tie inlays. At the very end, you mentioned you were going to finish the table with a base coat of shellac, followed by a top coat of water-based lacquer. What brands of shellac and lacquer do you use? Can you show us the cans they come in? Even better, I saw this question a little bit ago, so I put on here, a little ways down, a link for a video called George's Finishing Recipe. It might even be secret. Yeah, it's secret finishing recipe. Not a big secret. It's a video on WWGOA.com. So just check that link And that's where it talks through the manner in which I use shellac as a base coat and water-based finish as a top coat. Do you use tung oil on any of your woodworking projects? Nope. Linda says, my dad gave me a Craftsman router and table and stand that are probably 50 years old. I've played with it enough to know that the router is really hard to adjust. The fence on the table doesn't have a lot of options for adjustments. I could probably do something about the fence, but I'm thinking maybe I should just buy a new router and table and donate my dad's things. Dad's not around anymore, so I can't ask him. And in any case, he'd opt for old rather than new. I get that. What do you recommend? So these questions are always tough. I used to routinely do tool tests for American Woodworker magazine 25 years ago. I haven't tool tested routers in a couple of decades. So here's what I can say. Grain of salt, this is a statistic of 1. I have had this DeWalt router in my shop for quite a while. It is a DW618 right there. DW618. It is variable speed, 12 amps, I believe, which makes it about 2¼ horse. It came in a kit, so it came with the fixed base that you see there, and also a plunge base, so that's very versatile. I have 2 of these. One is the handheld I use with dovetail jigs and that kind of stuff, and other router jigs, and then the other one is in a router table. So I don't know, they've been running in here for a while. I've had great luck with Bosch routers. Excuse me. I've got another router table that's got a Milwaukee 3.5 horse router in it. That's the table and setup I use if I'm doing raised panels, because that gives me more horsepower for that big raised panel bit. So that's the, I've had success with that Milwaukee 3 horse, Bosch 2¼ horse. That also came in a kit, fixed base and plunge base. The DeWalt 2¼ horse came with a fixed base and a plunge base. So all of those are good. Router tables, I have 3 in here. One is a Rockler table that has served me well. One is the Harvey table. I love that table. The fence on the Harvey table, the adjustment on that is very precise, very easy to be precise. And then I've got a saw stop table as well that's annexed onto my table saw. So, and the saw stop is also a great system. And that their fence is good. It's solid. I've also got the saw stop lift in that table. So if you're looking to buy a router table, there's 3, again, a statistic of 1, but my saw stop table, my Harvey table, and my Rockler table have all done well for me. In addition to being used here, I put them in my truck when I'm teaching on the road, and I take them with me. So they've got some miles. They've literally got some miles on them. You have mentioned PS wood before. Yep. And they're Timberwolf bandsaw blades. If I were to order 3 different new blades, what thickness blade or types of blades would you recommend I consider and why? Yes. You don't know what to say. I don't know. Because what I would do, the best way to approach this, the customer service at PS Wood, so it's P like pastry, S like Sam, wood, and I'm pretty sure their website is pswood.com. The customer service there is really, really good. What you should do is call them and say, here's what I'm fixing to do. Because the reason I can't answer this is I don't know, do you want to resaw? Do you want to scroll? Do you want to have a all-purpose on your saw all the time blade? Do you want to cut kiln dried wood? Do you want to cut green wood? All of that stuff affects your blade choice. As far as size, Some blades for resawing can take up to a 1-inch blade. I've owned a bandsaw that could take 1.25 inch blade. Some saws can only take up to a 3/4 inch blade. So really the best thing to do is call them, tell them what saw you have, what model number, and then what you want to do. And they will say, you need one of these, one of these, and one of these. And they will happily identify those and sell you those 3 blades. And that's going to be a rifle shot to getting the blades that serve you best. Perry says, what can be made with air-dried white ash that's at least 30 years old? So this is going to get the same answer. Yes. What do you want to make? I think that, and I'm not trying to be much of a smart aleck here, but I can't define, I don't know. If somebody said to me, you should make a bread box from that, I'd say, but I don't need a bread box. I own a refrigerator. Like, so there's a bunch of stuff here. Like, is it a boatload of ash? Is it a piece of ash? How much of it do you have? And then I think if where you're going with this is it's air dried rather than kiln dried, that's not a thing. Like, for centuries, for millennia, woodworkers built stuff out of wood that was only air dried. Kiln dried wood is a relatively new thing. So 300 years ago, 200 years ago, beautiful furniture was being built with air dried wood. You just have to recognize that air drying brings it down probably to 12 or 14%. Kiln drying 6 to 8%. The higher that initial moisture content is, the more subject it is to seasonal movement. So in this part of the world, Wisconsin, gets pretty humid in the summer, pretty dry when the furnace is running in the winter. So there's a lot of seasonal movement. That's not an issue as long as we don't prevent that movement. So you could take this air-dried ash, and this is air-dried ash right here that this workbench is made out of, and it's 36 inches wide. As long as you accommodate the movement, that's fine. You just can't try to stop Mother Nature. So make furniture, make cabinets, make toys, make baseball bats. They're traditionally made out of ash. The range of stuff you could make is make something you want is the bottom line, but don't feel like you're limited in that it's air dried. You just have to accommodate that. John says, what's the green stretchy tape you used this morning? It's sourced in that PDF. And so from the box video, from the box live stream, there's some specialized stuff. The chamfer bit, spiral bit, green stretchy tape, I think a couple other things. And they're all those sources are in the PDF. Are you any closer to adding a laser engraver to your arsenal? Well, I want one. So yes, from Desire. I just finished a router-based jig. I'm going to use it here for cutting dados. I'm going to use it extensively in a class. So I just had this conversation with my friend Dwayne the other day. He owns a laser, but he lives in Pennsylvania. In order to prevent potential mistakes when people besides me are using the jig, I would like to have it labeled. I'd like to have some stuff on there, some information on the jig. Baltic birch jig, laser would be absolutely perfect for engraving and highly legible. Baltic birch engraves like a dream, laser engraves like a dream. So I really wish before next September, when I need this for a class, that I had a laser I could do this with. So the answer is, at this second, it's no, because I haven't sprung the cash for one, but I'm constantly, I don't know, I run the CNCs a lot in here. And again, that's a great way to augment the work I do on CNCs would be to have a laser to do stuff. I just cut out a set of Adirondack chair templates for a customer. And yes, on the CNC, I can label those parts. I can engrave them, but it'd be cleaner, nicer to throw them into a laser. And this is template A, which is the arm. This is template B, which is the back slat. It's way high on my list, but I'm not. I have not written a purchase order with the company yet. And DWG, whomever that is, looking forward to seeing you in Indianapolis next week. So what that's about is I do travel to teach. So I teach in my shop here. A weekend ago, I was in Dayton, Ohio. I spent a Saturday teaching there. And then next week, I'm in Indianapolis with Central Indiana Woodworkers. Am I getting that right? I think it's CIWW. And I'm teaching 2 days down there. And so that's pretty cool. Then later in May, I have another one of those with a woodworking club. And I'm sorry if you're watching, it's either Southern Illinois or Southern Indiana. I can't remember. So if your club is looking for that kind of thing, if it's driving distance, I load my truck with stuff and I come teach. David says, I'm planning a new wood shop in the form of a full-size 2-car garage with 10-foot ceilings. Brilliant idea, the 10-foot ceilings. I don't intend to replace much of my current equipment except where necessary. That being said, I've never been happy with my planer or joiner, which were handed down years ago. I'd be hard-pressed to replace them both. My question, what are your thoughts of relying solely on a high-quality planer to perform both functions with the use of a flat planer sled? So, interesting question. Can we substitute a planer for a jointer? And I'm sorry, but the answer is really no. So can you flatten slabs? Can you flatten boards? Yes. There are 11 billion ways to do that. So, I mean, clearly one would be winding sticks and a hand plane. Ooh, that gives me the heebie-jeebies. Another would be a router gantry, where the router is passing over your work, providing one flat face. That flat face is on the bottom. When we send it through a planer, we'll get the other face parallel. That can also work. You can build a sled for a planer. So you're taking the twist out of whatever you're planing. Same deal. Get one flat face, remove the sled, flip it over, plane the other face. What we can't get from that are dead straight edges that you would use for an edge glue up. So in what you're describing here, can I plane to flatness when we're talking about faces? So face jointing rather than edge jointing, yes. If you own a router table, look on WWGOA for, I think we have 2 or 3 or 4 different content thingies about jointing on a router table. So if you would like to pull the trigger on a planer, not pull the trigger on a joiner yet, you can get away without having a jointer for a while by joining on your planer jointing on your router table within certain limitations on the router table. The big stumbling block there is they're not just universally interchangeable because of edge work. You're not going to get edges for a glue up dead straight with a planer like you will with a jointer. David says, when making the box earlier today, used a lockable ruler I've never seen before. Could you share the maker and source? So yes, let me think for a moment where I put that. I know that I'm pretty sure what I was using was just a longer form of this. All right, is this what you're talking about? If you're still watching. So it was a 12-inch version of this because I had to measure out further, right? Or maybe I did use this. Anyway, Swan, S-W-A-N, Swan Tool Group is the company that made this. And what worked great for this today, if you didn't see it, what I was doing was I was measuring from the end. This is slidable. So I slid this to the dimension I wanted. Yeah, it was this shorter one. I locked that at 4 3/4. I positioned this against the router bit, and then I positioned a stop on the router table against this. So having that adjustable is handy. And then too, if you're a marker the way I am, which would be set this, flip that over, let that ride on an edge while you're marking with a pencil, it's also very useful for that. So that was what I was doing. And again, it's Swan, S-W-A-N, Swan Tool Group. Look at all the tool talk we're doing. Dennis says hello from Dennis in West Virginia. Hello, Dennis. My last trip to West Virginia was on the motorcycle trip, my friend, whoops, got to switch cameras back. Motorcycle trip Charlie and I did, my friend Charlie and I did a few years ago. We rode the Blue Ridge Parkway and we jumped on the north end. If I think long enough, I'll remember where. I think that was Virginia. What a trip that was. So I'm completely distracted there. That was such a blast. Terry says, George, finally upgrading my router table after 40 years using an early Woodsmith design. Is it worth the extra dollars to use an aluminum router plate? I have a 3.5 horsepower plunge router, so I probably will not have a lift. Well, I'm thinking of what's in my tables. I don't know. They're lifts, so they're probably hanging on aluminum plates. But I've had, and I hate to say plastic, because I don't think it's really plastic, Bakelite, right? Is that what that harder plastic commonly used in tools is? But I don't think you have to be aluminum there. I think you could be Bakelite, it could be phenolic, it could be, really we're just looking for something that's robust enough that it's not going to sag. So as long as it's in that category, robust, then I think you're going to be fine. And I don't think every router plate out there for a router table is aluminum. I think there's a lot of other stuff that's plenty rigid. Like I said, Bakelite and phenolic would be two alternatives. Charlie says, can you make a spline on a miter corner using a router table without a jig? So let me spline this to you. See what I did there? So what we're talking about, here would be a great example. I've got a corner and I want to spline that. I don't see a way to do this without something to hold on to this. So typically what we're doing is we're cradling this router table or table saw, it's the same net effect. We're cradling this in a jig. And then there's feet down here. And this whole thing is passing over a cutter. And that cutter could be a dado head. It could be a dovetail bit. It could be a straight router bit. And then after that slot has been made, we push a thingy into it. We push a spline into it. So on a router table, if we're splining this box, I'm rereading the question. If we're splining this, I don't know how one would hold this and prevent it from moving while you're trying to spline it. And I think that doesn't mean you got to buy a jig. That's a pretty simple, that's the start of a splining jig right there. It just then needs 45-degree feet on each side to stabilize it, and you're ready to go. So it wouldn't have to be, doesn't have to be commercially made, although companies make them, and it doesn't have to be complex, but I can't, if anybody's got a way to do this, freehand, basically, let me know. But I don't see a good way to make that happen without. Erwin says, lots of wood is kiln dried. Can a green piece of wood be dried in an ordinary kitchen oven? At what temp and for how long? Well, theoretically. So let me, hey, Jess, look on the site, look on GOA and search microwave drying or something like that. Because I've dried green wood bowl blanks in a microwave. And it works, but it's way more of an art than a science. So let's talk about kiln drying for a second. In a kiln, in the perfect world, there's a drying schedule that's the right drying schedule for oak compared to pine, compared to ash, so because those woods have different characteristics, the drying schedule is different. Generally, we're not simply raising the temp to X. It's usually somewhere around 130 degrees. We're not just raising the temp and letting it roast. There's more involved with that. Additionally, there's a dehumidifier in there that's drawing moisture out of the environment. So usually it's a slow ramp process of raise the heat, dehumidify, raise the heat, dehumidify, and maintaining careful control. We don't want anything to happen too fast. If you dry too quickly, what you'll end up with wood that's case hardened. What that means is that the outside is dried at a different rate than the core. And typically the symptom of that is if you rip it on your table saw, it either springs open or it pinches shut. So my feeling is if all I do is I put a chunk of green wood in an oven and I set the oven to 135 and I walk away, it's probably going to case harden that wood because I'm not doing any humidity control there. With the microwave, when I've done this, yeah, so Jess put the link up, and ironically enough, the video is called Drying Wood in a Microwave. When I did it in a microwave, if I remember this right, I'm pretty sure I blew up a few pieces, which is I applied microwavicity, and yes, it drove moisture out, but it drove it out too fast, and the wood cracked. So it took some messing around with green wood to get it to where it would dry it, but not ruin it. And I think in that video, what I did is I rough turned a bowl, and the premise was you don't want to wait 6 months for that to dry, like my friend Paul does, put it on a shelf and let it naturally dry. So I put it in a microwave so that rough turning could go back on the lathe today rather than 6 months from today. So I think in the end it worked. Watch the video. But I don't think you could just put it in the oven. And the other thing I'll say about this, I believe one of my final lessons in that microwave video is don't do this in the microwave you're heating coffee in. I'm pretty sure it imparted a gross smell into the microwave. It's all plastic in there, and that smell kind of embedded in the plastic. So I think what I may have done there is turned what was the household microwave into the shop microwave for that reason. So watch the video, see what you think, and experiment. But I don't think I think a kitchen oven is not your best answer. Emil says hello from Connecticut. I will be in Connecticut again next October, teaching at the Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking. Gregory says, George, have you done through dovetails with shape or origin? In doing through dovetails where the two pieces are different thicknesses, do I need to run the program twice using two different thicknesses to generate the pattern for the pins and then one for the tails? Hope this makes sense. So the first answer is no, I haven't done this. I'm trying to envision. It's through dovetails. So I feel like what one would do, your tailboard is vertical, right? The pattern you're going to cut for the tails, which is really just in and out, and the shape is defined by a dovetail bit. Is that how it's doing it? So this depth ends up, it's got to be equal to the thickness of your mating piece because it's a through dovetail. So for this, for the pin, for the tails, if your mating piece is a 1/2 inch thick, you're cutting down a 1/2 inch. Then when you cut pins and sockets, that's a little bit easier. That pattern, again, is in the origin, presumably, and you're getting that by using a straight bit, and you would just set, if the tailboard is thinner than the pin and socket board, then I would reduce, it's probably impossible to see that pencil line, I would reduce the depth of cut so that on pins and sockets, my depth this way is 1/4. But then on tails, my depth of cut this way is 1/2, assuming that that's the manner in which it does that, which I think it kind of has to be to get sharp corners on the bottom of the tails. So using two different thicknesses. So no, I think you just have to, I'll have to look at it, but I think you just have to change depth of cut for those two distinctly different passes. Emil asked, could you put felt on the bottom of the feet on the box? Sure. Yep. Yeah, if you got self-adhesive felt, which comes in sheets, like paper-sized sheets, you could peel it off, stick it on, peel off the paper, stick it on, and then use an X-Acto knife to cut this distinct shape. So Jess, who's on top of the game here, Swan Tool Group, she put that link in the chat roll. Revisiting the drying wood in a microwave. She put that link in the chat roll. Question. The reason I am asking what style of clamping mechanism the Clampzilla uses is because I need to find wider mechanism to accommodate faces or stack of edges. Yonoseke, I don't know. I don't have a context here at all. The reason I am asking what style of clamping mechanism the Clampzilla uses is because I need to find a wider, I don't know what a Clampzilla is. So sorry, I don't know. It kind of feels like, was there another question before this? And this was a follow-up? Because I don't know what's cooking there. David says, and don't burn the house down. Always good advice. Yeah, that whole drying wood in your microwave or your oven, you know, leave it to the pros, man. Or on a bowl, patiently wait 6 months for it to air dry. Kenny, when I'm face jointing on my jointer, I'm getting a wedge shape. What am I doing wrong? Wedge shape. So is what we're saying here that you're jointing a face and then jointing a face? Because that's probably going to make, maybe not a wedge, but it's going to make something irregular. So for this, to speak to this, on WWGOA, search the video difference between a planer and jointer. And I'm pretty sure I got that title right. And that speaks to this. If what you do on a joiner is you face joint, flip, face joint, each of those faces is most likely smooth, flat, straight. What they aren't necessarily is parallel to each other. That's what a planer does. So that's why in the normal sequence of events, one would face joint one face, put that flat face down on your planer, and plane the other face. The guarantee from a planer is that the two faces will be parallel, and every board you plane, if you have multiple pieces, will come out the same thickness. You don't get either of those guarantees from a jointer. So if that's what you mean by, if you're jointing two faces and they're not coming out parallel, that's because it's a joiner. And you need to run the second aspect of that. The second face needs to be handled on a planer. David says, I've used a slot cutter in my router to cut miter splines. This eliminates the wonky efforts to hold the box at 45 degrees because it rests on my router table on its side. So if I put a slot cutter in my table, I don't see how I could rest this on its side, because then I'm going to get the slot's going to go this way. I need this to rest like on its bottom. And if I'm splining this corner, I need this to go past that slot cutter. So I'm probably missing a step. Ken goes on to say, use this program to design dovetails on the Shaper Origin. All right. Dovetails.bieber.development. I'll look at it. It sounds cool. I'll have to try it. So Shaper Origin, we've been talking about, if you're not familiar, that is the handheld CNC. It looks like this router, but it's computer driven. And if you're at a woodworking show and you get the chance to touch one, you should do so. It's difficult to grasp. I couldn't grasp. I own 5 CNC machines. I couldn't grasp how this worked until I had my hands on one at a show. Then it made perfect sense. So if you get a chance to do that, to test drive one, if you're interested in it, then do that, and then it'll make sense. Yeah, so Kenny says his pieces are coming out thicker on one end than the other. So yeah, if you're face jointing two faces, that's going to happen because you're basically just you're just mimicking what the thickness of the board is now. And at a big scale, when I run my sawmill, I'm reasonably sure I'm cutting parallel faces, but it's a bandsaw mill. So maybe it's a little thicker over here, a little thinner over here. And if that's what I start with, when I face joint, I'm just replicating those planes on that board. So find that video, which Jess, because she's sharp and on her game, has found the video for you, differences between jointers and planers, and watch that. And it'll spline for you. Keeps coming around. It'll spline for you what I'm talking about there with achieving parallel faces. And then Ken references, so if you're a Shaper owner and you haven't been taking advantage of Shaper sessions, you're missing out. So he references one from May 2nd of 2024, where they explain dovetails with the Origin. Cool. Couple things. One, I hit the end of the questions here. You've still got 10 minutes or so, 9 minutes or so, if you've got another question you want to throw in. But in the interim, big thank you as always to Tightbond. Tool talk this month was the Micro Jig FitFinder. This is sourced in the description for you. If you need to find center of stuff, this is indispensable for that. One of the things I neglected to mention earlier, it's got magnets in the bottom. So when you're using this on a cast iron table saw, cast iron bandsaw table, it's going to help it, that's going to help it stick in place. Just makes it a little bit easier to use. There's an accessory kit available for it, and that adds a lot to the versatility. It changes the stylus out here on the tip. That adds a lot to the versatility of it. Earlier today, I did a live stream making this box. It's a pretty cool project. Everything is done on the router table. The miter joinery, the finger recesses, the foot recesses down here, all that work is on the router table. And one, don't forget Mother's Day is right around the corner. If you got to make a gift, this might be it. Two, if you're just looking for ways to maximize what you can do with the versatility of a router table, this is a great project for that. And one of the things I think is cool about it is that with the chamfer, which is also there on the top of the sides and on the bottom of the lid, no hardware, that just nests in there automatically. So a little gee whiz effect with that. We talked about rulers and marking tools. That's the Swan Tool Group thing. And we have a new question. I've heard you can use an MDF sled to reduce snipe on a planer. Yeah, it doesn't have to be MDF. What people will do is, especially on lunchbox planers, benchtop planers, on those, typically the main table is maybe 12 inches wide. And then there are folding wings on either side. And the problem with that is getting everything coplanar from the start of the infeed side to the end of the outfeed side. So they overcome that by making one large piece. And we've got a couple different concepts going here. One large piece that is now your planer bed, that stays in place. And your material passes over it. If I'm doing that, in all likelihood, I want melamine for that. Melamine is a thermally fused plastic coating on particle board. That's going to slide better than MDF would. So if I'm doing that, if I want to bridge infeed, main, outfeed, I'm going to do that with melamine. There has to be a little hook underneath on the infeed side so the melamine stays in place and doesn't travel with your material. If you want to build sleds where, what we talked about earlier, you're trying to flatten a twisted board, and I'm going to do that by putting it on a sled and shimming the high corners so it can't rock as it goes through. MDF could be a candidate for that. You would have to put some rails on the MDF so that the MDF can't flex, as this is all going through the planer. But yeah, MDF, as it lays, MDF is dead flat. But it doesn't have a lot of rigidity to it. So you would have to stiffen it up somehow if you're making a planer sled out of it. Rubio monocoat versus shellac, Danish oil, and other finishes. I've never used Rubio monocoat, so I don't know. This would be a great question for Mark Spagnolo, Wood Whisperer. He uses Rubio a lot. And Danish oil, like shellac versus Danish oil, that's a little easier. Shellac is a film finish, Danish oil is an oil. So oils soak in, film finishes, shellac, lacquer, polyurethane, those build up on a surface. So in my world, my go-to finish is the recipe that Jess got the link for earlier, which is shellac as a seal coat, water-based finish as a top coat. That gives me a great deal of protection. You don't get a lot of, if this glass was sweating and I set that on an oil finished table, not a lot of protection there. If I set it on my water-based finish table, that could sit there and sweat, or I could spill coffee and it could sit there for 24 hours and not ruin that finish. So that's a big part of the difference. Erwin says, for small tools that are not stored in a temperature-controlled humid environment, what do you suggest to prevent rust? Glide coat is my go-to. Let me grab a can of it. I believe I know right where it is. Humid environment or not, so my shop is really not humid until summer hits. But everything in here gets hit with that. So Glide Coat is a tool-specific lubricant. You spray it on. And the wet will flash very quickly and it leaves a dry lube behind. There's no silicone in this. So there's nothing to migrate into your work. So it's not just, it does go on all my cast iron tools, but it also goes on the plastic base of this router. So it glides more readily across my work. It goes on the top of my aluminum dovetail jig. It goes on any place parts are interacting that they get a coat of that Glide Coat. All right, we're very close to wrapping up. I've got a set of Stanley number 4 Trammel points. Now I have to make a beam. Do you have a suggestion for the type of wood? Yeah, I just, my Trammel points are in my gear that's going to Indiana with me next week. But this is the beam for them, just a piece of walnut. So I would say any hardwood is going to work great for that. Jim says, what problems might I have using solvent-based polyurethane over water-based stain? Let it dry. And at the end of the day, the best answer for this is call the manufacturer of the polyurethane and tell them what you're doing and what stain you're using and ask them what they recommend you do. Because the amount of drying time. So for instance, epoxy is a great example. Can you put epoxy over a stained surface? Yes. But I know in the case of epoxy, yes, the stain is dry and I can no longer move it with my finger. In maybe a day or two, at that moment, it's still not ready for epoxy. If you put epoxy on at that time, it will affect the epoxy adversely because it's not really flashed off. It's not completely flashed off. So there's a pretty significant difference between dry and absolutely completely dry. So the best thing to do, especially since you're mixing solvent-based, which is water-based X and solvent-based Y, I would call the manufacturer of the polyurethane, tell them what you're trying to do, and get this answer from them and make sure, because and you can also experiment on scrap, but the last thing you want is for that polyurethane to flake, crack, or bubble because you didn't wait long enough on the stain. Okay, so we're done. Big thank you to Jess for being so on top of her game and getting all those links for you. Next month, this is March, right? So in April, the live Q&A is later in the month because I'm teaching out of town on the normal day. So it's pushed back just a little. Just watch your email and you'll get notice of that. Other than that, build a box, go check that live stream, get the PDF, and I will see you when I look at you.